Welcome to the deep dive. Get ready for, well, a fascinating sprint through history. We're meeting a whole collection of individuals whose lives, whose legacies, really continue to shape our world.
In our guides today, just the letters F and G.
Exactly. It sounds simple, but we've really dug into a huge range of biographical entries. It's like a mini encyclopedia spanning centuries, continents.
Right, and our job really is to pull out the most compelling stories, maybe find some surprising connections hiding in this, alphabetical slice of history.
And the variety is just incredible. You've got artists like Fabergé, politicians like Faisal, scientists like Florey.
Athletes, authors like Faulkner. It really shows the sheer breadth of human achievement captured here.
So what we're aiming for is to give you a quick but solid understanding of these key people.
Yeah, highlighting those unexpected details, maybe introducing you to someone new who really sparks your interest, all without, drowning you in facts.
Okay, so where do we start? The F's.
Makes sense. Let's start with Fabergé, Peter Carl Fabergé.
Ah, yes. The name just screams extravagance, doesn't it?
Uh-huh.
Especially those incredible jeweled Easter eggs for the Russian Tsar and nobility.
Absolutely. Symbols of a vanished world, really. An era that crashed to a halt with World War I.
And it's interesting, he was of French descent but died in Switzerland, far from that imperial Russia.
The craftsmanship in those eggs, though, just astonishing. Some had tiny models inside, palaces, carriages.
Little mechanical wonders, almost like time capsules of that fading empire.
Precisely. A very different world from, say, Fabius.
Right. A long, long career in French socialist politics. Still going strong, actually.
He's held so many high-profile roles. Minister for this, prime minister for that, foreign minister recent.
Started as a deputy back in '78. Minister for Industry, Prime Minister 84 to 86, economic stuff in the 2000s, Foreign Minister 2012, 2016.
And now, president of the Constitutional Council since 2016. That's serious longevity in politics.
It really is. Navigating huge shifts in French political life. Quite the survivor.
Definitely speaks to a deep understanding of the system. Okay, sticking with France, but going back a bit. Fedard. Louis Fedard.
Uh-huh. Soldier, colonial administrator. Started in Algeria, but really made his mark in Senegal.
Right. Governor there twice, starting in 1852. Really cemented French power.
And founded Dakar, which became the capital, of course. Laid the groundwork for French West Africa.
It's a complex legacy, isn't it? Development alongside colonial expansion and military force.
And then the Franco-Prussian War connection.
Yeah.
Called back to fight in 1870.
Yeah, a tough end to that phase of his career, defeated near St. Quentin. Shows how these colonial figures often got drawn back into European conflicts.
Okay, let's shift focus eastward. Saudi Arabia. King Faisal.
Faisal bin Abdulaziz Al Saud, king from 64 to 75.
But he had a lot of power before that. Prime Minister, Foreign Minister from 53, even ruled effectively for a while.
And that family dynamic, forced out by his half-brother, King Saud.
But then reconciled and took the throne when Saud's health failed.
A fascinating look at royal succession politics. His reign saw modernization efforts, a more assertive foreign policy.
Until his assassination. By a nephew, also named Faisal, his brother Khalid succeeded him.
Really highlights the internal pressures and dynamics within the Saudi royal family.
No, another Faisal. Faisal was first king of Iraq.
Fazl bin Hussein, son of Hussein of the Hijaz, key figure in the Arab Revolt.
Alongside T.E. Lawrence, famously, fought the Ottomans in World War I.
Right, and then briefly king of Syria, before the French pushed him out.
So the British installed him in Iraq instead, a place where he didn't really have deep roots initially.
Which must have been a challenge, trying to build a nation from diverse groups.
And his stance shifted over time, didn't it? Early talks with Chaim Weizmann about cooperation.
Yes, a hint of a different path, perhaps. But later protested Jewish immigration to Palestine as tensions grew.
Iraq gained independence under him in '32. Britain gave him honors.
But his death is shrouded in a bit of mystery, isn't it? Died suddenly in Switzerland, suspicions of poisoning.
And his son Ghazi, I also died suspiciously later, adds a layer of intrigue.
It really does. Okay, changing pace. George Farquhar.
An Irish dramatist. Short life, but quite a reach.
His play, The Recruiting Officer.
Has this amazing little footnote in history. It was the first play ever performed in Sydney, Australia, back in 1789.
Incredible. A piece of restoration comedy traveling right across the globe to a brand new colony. Speaks volumes about cultural transmission.
It really does. Okay, crossing the Atlantic now. David Farragut.
American Admiral. Civil War hero.
Despite being Southern-born, which initially caused some suspicion.
Right, but he proved incredibly loyal and effective for the Union. The capture of New Orleans in '62 was huge.
Daring move, sailing past the forts, smashing the Confederate fleet, opened up the Mississippi.
Absolutely crucial. Directly helped Grant's Vicksburg campaign by controlling more of the river.
And then Mobile Bay in '64, cut off blockade runners.
And gave us that iconic quote, facing underwater mines, or torpedoes as they called them then.
Damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead. Just legendary.
Became a symbol of naval resolve. His contribution was so immense, they actually created the rank of admiral just for him in 1866.
Wow. Embodiment of courage.
Okay, fast forward quite a bit. Anthony Fauci.
Right. American immunologist. Very prominent figure, especially recently.
Decades of work, though, especially on AIDS research. Groundbreaking stuff.
Earned him the Presidential Medal of Freedom back in 2008.
And then, of course, his highly visible role advising on COVID-19.
Under both Trump and Biden, navigating that tricky intersection of science and politics, served until 2023. A long career in public health service.
Definitely. Okay, literature next. William Faulkner.
One of the greats of American literature, though he struggled early on.
Yeah, it took a while to get recognition, but then came those powerful novels. The Sound and the Fury, As I Lay Dying, Light in August.
Really delving deep into the American South, its history, its social fabric, intense stuff.
Using that stream of consciousness technique, right?
Well
Getting
said.
right inside the characters' heads. Masterfully done. Though, interestingly, it was Sanctuary, a more sensational novel, that first brought him popular success.
Fascinating how that sometimes happens. Back to France now. Felix Faure.
President Four. Interesting background, leather merchant, ship owner. Rose through the political ranks,
His presidency saw the Franco-Russian alliance cemented, which was significant.
but he was also deeply involved in the Dreyfus affair. Strongly opposed a retrial.
Which really fueled the political divisions in France at the time. Resisted a lot of pressure.
And then his death. Quite the story. Died suddenly in the Élysée Palace.
In the arms of his mistress, as the story goes. A rather dramatic end.
Adds a certain notoriety to his legacy. Okay, Spanish royalty next. Felipe IV.
King of Spain and Portugal for a time, though Portugal broke away. Reign 1621 to 1665.
Seen as conscientious, but ultimately not very effective.
Largely overshadowed by his chief minister, Olivares, their ambitious wars didn't go well.
Led to decline, loss of territory, Portugal, the Netherlands.
But his legacy lives on visually, doesn't it? Through those amazing portraits by Velázquez.
Absolutely. Velázquez captured the king and his court during that complex period of grandeur and, well, decline. A stunning visual record.
Then Felipe V, the first Bourbon king of Spain.
Right. His connection to Louis XIV of France was the whole reason for the War of the Spanish Succession. Big European conflict.
Ended by the Treaty of Utrecht in 1713. Spain lost territory, Spanish Netherlands, Gibraltar.
But Felipe kept the Spanish throne. Established the Bourbon dynasty there, which still rules today.
His reign was shaped by powerful women too, wasn't it?
Very much so. First, the Princess de Ursin, then his second wife, Elizabeth Farnese, whose ambitions really drove foreign policy.
And he struggled personally. Severe manic depression. Even abdicated briefly.
Yeah, poignant details that the singing of Farinelli, the famous castrato, supposedly soothed his melancholia. A glimpse into the private struggles behind the throne.
Wow, okay, changing gears entirely.
Yeah.
Enzo Ferrari.
The name says it all, really. Italian designer of racing cars. Legend.
President of Ferrari Automobili from 1940 to 1977. Built the brand into what it is.
Driven by a passion for racing. More than just a businessman, an engineer, a visionary. Synonymous with speed and Italian style.
A true icon. Back to politics. Geraldine Ferraro.
American politician. Broke major ground.
Lawyer. Served in the House of Representatives.
And then, in 1984, became the first woman vice presidential candidate for a major U.S. party.
A real landmark moment. Even though the Mondale Ferraro ticket didn't win, it was huge. Paved the way.
Absolutely. Challenged long-standing barriers. She
Well-
wrote about it in her autobiography, too.
From politics to music. Kathleen Ferrier.
Celebrated English contralto. And a remarkable story.
Didn't start singing professionally until she was 30. Had been a telephonist.
Incredible, isn't it? But rose rapidly, became one of the greatest contraltos of her time.
Her debut in Britain's Rape of Lucretia was key, and her work with Bruno Walter.
Especially reviving Mahler's music, those recordings are still treasured. Such warmth and expression in her voice.
But such a tragically short career. Died of cancer in 1952.
A huge loss to the music world. Okay, back to the military. John Arbuthnot Fisher.
Lord Fisher, hugely influential British admiral.
As First Sea Lord, he really shook up the Royal Navy in the early 20th century. Total modernization.
Dockyards, gunnery, ship designs, submarines, torpedoes, everything.
And he championed the dreadnought battleship. Revolutionary design, all big guns.
Made everything else obsolete overnight.
But it also kicked off a massive naval arms race with Germany. An unintended consequence, perhaps.
And his relationship with Churchill was complex, wasn't it? Churchill brought him back as First Sea Lord during World War I after Battenberg resigned.
Yeah, a famous love-hate relationship, as it's often described. Two very strong personalities.
Now for an Irish nationalist, Lord Edward Fitzgerald.
Aristocrat turned revolutionary. Fought against the American Revolution initially.
Then became a huge supporter of the French Revolution. Even renounced his title in Paris.
Came back to Ireland, got involved with the United Irishmen, tried to get French help for an uprising.
But it all ended tragically. Wounded resisting arrest in Dublin in 1798.
Died in prison before trial. Embodies that passionate, often doomed, struggle for Irish independence.
Then another Edward Fitzgerald, English poet and translator.
Lived a quiet life, mostly, but achieved lasting fame for one work.
His translation of the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam.
Exactly. And it wasn't a literal translation, was it? More capturing the spirit, the mood.
Which really resonated with Victorian readers. Became incredibly popular, though it was published anonymously at first.
A case of the translation almost becoming more famous than the original, in the West at least. His friendships with Tennyson and Carlyle show his literary connections.
Robert Fitzroy next, English Vice Admiral.
Best known as the captain of HMS Beagle.
The ship that carried Darwin on his famous voyage. A pivotal role in science history, unintentionally perhaps.
Fitzroy himself was accomplished, though. Made contributions to meteorology, later governor of New Zealand.
But his life ended tragically. Suicide.
A reminder of the complex human stories behind these historical achievements.
Bob Fitzsimmons, boxer.
English-born, grew up in New Zealand, made his name in the U.S.
Became world heavyweight champion in 1897, beating Jim Corbett.
Then lost the title to Jeffries, a big name in late 19th century boxing, known for power and an unusual style.
Kirsten Flagstad, Norwegian soprano.
Dramatic soprano. Came from a musical family.
Really hit her stride internationally in the 1930s, especially in Wagner roles, Isolde, Brunhilde.
Considered one of the greats, powerful voice, commanding presence. Her recordings with Melchior and Furtwängler are legendary.
Benchmark performances capturing a golden age of Wagnerian singing.
Absolutely. Now for a really different figure, Pavel Florensky.
Russian polymath, theologian, philosopher, mathematician, quite a combination.
Published on an incredibly wide range of subjects. Ordained as an Orthodox priest.
But his life took a tragic turn under the Soviets, exiled in 1928.
And later executed by the NKVD. A stark reminder of the suppression of intellectuals and religious figures during that era.
Juan José Flores y Aramburu, significant in Ecuador's early history.
Venezuelan-born, rose under Bolivar during the Wars of Independence.
Led Ecuador's secession from Gran Colombia, became its first president in 1830.
Had a long, complex political career.
No.
Switched between conservative and liberal alliances. Tried to extend his term.
Eventually forced into exile. Tried to regain power later, but failed. His story reflects the instability of many new Latin American republics.
It does. Okay. Howard Florey, Australian pathologist.
Crucial figure in the story of penicillin.
Absolutely pivotal. Building on Fleming's initial discovery of the penicillium mold.
It was Florey and his collaborator Ernst Chain who figured out how to isolate, purify, and mass-produce it.
Transformed it from a lab curiosity into a life-saving drug. Their successful trials on mice, then humans, in the early 40s.
Revolutionized medicine, showed the power of penicillin as a chemotherapeutic, a huge breakthrough.
A fantastic example of scientific collaboration and persistence.
Ford Madox Ford, English novelist.
Key figure in literary modernism, known for his own novels, but also his collaborations.
With Joseph Conrad, right? And his role as an editor, promoting new writers.
Exactly. Significant influence.
Gerald R. Ford, 38th U.S. President.
Had perhaps the most unusual path to the presidency ever.
Long career in Congress, Michigan representative, on the Warren Commission, minority leader.
Then appointed VP after Agnew resigned. And then became president automatically when Nixon resigned over Watergate.
Totally unprecedented. Took office in a time of huge national turmoil.
And made that controversial decision to pardon Nixon. Aimed to heal the nation, but sparked huge debate.
Continued Nixon's foreign policy with Kissinger, survived 2 assassination attempts.
Narrowly lost the '76 election to Carter. A brief but really consequential presidency. Interesting how his views evolved later, too.
Yeah, the Ford. Henry Ford.
An absolute giant of American industry. Changed everything.
Established Ford Motor Company. Introduced the Model T.
Which just dominated the early car market. Simple, reliable, affordable.
Made possible by his revolutionary innovation, the moving assembly line.
Changed manufacturing forever. Increased efficiency dramatically, made cars accessible, profoundly impacted American life.
So the Model T eventually lost ground, didn't it, to GM under Sloan offering more variety.
Right. Ford responded with the Model A, the V8 engine. But he was a complex figure, opposed the New Deal, had tough labor practices.
Until his workers finally unionized, and his company went global, manufacturing in Britain and Europe, too.
A truly transformative and complicated legacy.
Jean-Honoré Fragonard, French painter.
Rococo artist.
Yeah.
Known for those light, sensual, elegant paintings.
Capturing the spirit of 18th century French aristocratic life. Very distinctive style.
Janet Frame, New Zealand author.
Such a powerful and difficult personal story. Misdiagnosed with schizophrenia due to shyness.
Years of horrific treatment. Recounted in her autobiography, An Angel at My Table.
Which became a famous film, too. Despite all that, she was incredibly prolific. Novels, poetry, children's books.
A real testament to resilience. Her writing often explores isolation, identity, drawing on those intense experiences.
Anatole France, French writer, Nobel laureate.
Came from a book-selling background. Devoted to writing early on.
Known for his philosophy-tolerant, skeptical of dogma, clear, elegant writing style.
Became a strong supporter of Dreyfus during the affair. Used satire brilliantly in novels like Léo des Pingouins to critique injustice.
Won the Nobel Prize in 1921, a major literary figure.
Okay, the source notes Francis II of France and Francis II of the Holy Roman Empire are covered elsewhere. Same for Francis Ferdinand and Francis Joseph.
Got it. But we do have Sir Philip Francis.
Anglo-Irish politician and pamphleteer. Intriguing figure.
Widely believed to be the anonymous author of the Letters of Junius.
Those scathing attacks on the government in the 1760s and 70s caused a huge stir.
And his time in India.
Ah.
Intense conflict with Warren Hastings.
Led to a duel. France returned to England and pushed for Hastings' impeachment. Provided a lot of the evidence, though its accuracy was debated.
Also a supporter of the French Revolution. Fits his reformist outlook.
The source also notes Caesar Franck and Anne Frank are for another time. Understood. Important figures, definitely. But we do have Hans Frank.
A truly dark figure.
Yeah.
Nazi politician. Lawyer who rose high in the party.
Became Governor General of occupied Poland, directly oversaw the horrors there.
The extermination of millions. Chillingly, he kept detailed diaries.
Which he provided at the Nuremberg trials. Reportedly converted to Catholicism, expressed remorse before his execution.
Though his son Nicholas remained utterly unforgiving. A terrifying look at Nazi brutality.
Benjamin Franklin, where do you even start?
A true Renaissance man of the American founding. Printer, writer, scientist, inventor, diplomat, politician.
Involved in everything. Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, shaping the nation.
His scientific work, his diplomacy, just remarkable achievements across the board, embodied the Enlightenment spirit.
And that complex family note, his son William staying loyal to Britain, highlights the divisions of the Revolution.
A pivotal, indispensable figure in American history.
Moving to Australia, Malcolm Fraser.
Liberal politician. Prime Minister from 75 to 83.
Came to power controversially, didn't he, after the dismissal of Whitlam's Labour government?
Yes, a major constitutional crisis in 75. His hardline policy led to it. Still debated today.
Won several elections, then lost to Bob Hawke. Had an interesting post-political career, too.
Co-chaired the Commonwealth Group on Apartheid. And later became quite critical of his own Liberal Party, especially on refugees. Showed an evolution in his views.
Joseph von Fraunhofer, German optical physicist.
Made huge advances in optics. Started as an instrument maker, invented the spectroscope, and used it to discover those dark lines in the sun spectrum.
Fraunhofer lines, right. Wollaston saw a few, but Fraunhofer mapped hundreds.
Which paved the way for spectroscopy, understanding what stars are made of. Kirchhoff later explained their significance. Foundational work.
Ian Hector Fraser, another Australian scientist. Contemporary.
Made a massive contribution to global health. Developed the HPV vaccine with Jianzhou.
The first vaccine designed to prevent cancer, cervical cancer. Hugely important. Widely used now.
A monumental achievement in preventative medicine. recognized with many awards.
Okay, source notes Frederick I and II of Prussia are out for now.
Right. Major figures, but for another deep dive.
But Lucian Freud is mentioned? German-born British painter.
Hugely influential, known for those intense, unflinching portraits.
Raw honesty, psychological depth really captured the inner life of his subjects. Major 20th century figure.
And now, Sigmund Freud.
The founder of psychoanalysis, Austrian Jewish physician, revolutionized how we think about the mind.
His journey is fascinating. Started in medicine, influenced by Darwin, Goethe, worked under Brooke, who focused on physical causes, even experimented with cocaine briefly.
Then studied hypnosis with Charcot in Paris, collaborated with Breuer on studies in hysteria.
But then moved beyond hypnosis to develop free association. That was the key step toward psychoanalysis.
And his self-analysis, his letters with flies, led to concepts like the Oedipus complex, infantile sexuality, very controversial ideas.
Hugely. He saw the interpretation of dreams as his masterpiece, unlocking the unconscious, a massive shift from physical to psychological explanations for neuroses.
Founded the International Psychoanalytical Association, but some key followers broke away, didn't they?
Yes, Jung, Adler developed their own schools. Freud's work was often seen as more philosophical, less scientifically testable.
Popper criticized it on those grounds.
But his impact is undeniable. Civilization and its discontents, the ego and the ego concepts like the ego, superego, are part of our language now.
Absolutely. His ideas permeate psychology, literature, art, culture, fundamental shifts in understanding motivation, childhood, the unconscious.
Betty Friedan, American feminist writer,
Pivotal figure in second-wave feminism. Her book, The Feminine Mystique in '63.
was a bombshell. Articulated that widespread dissatisfaction women felt with limited roles.
Exactly. Challenged the whole post-war ideal of the happy housewife. Co-founded NW, the National Organization for Women.
A foundational text and activist, later wrote about aging too in The Fountain Age. Milton Friedman. Hugely influential American economist.
Conservative viewpoint. Strong critic of Keynesianism, government intervention.
Championed monetarism, the idea that money supply is the key driver. Long career at the University of Chicago.
Won the Nobel Prize in Economics in '76. His ideas really shaped policy in the late 20th century, still central to economic debates.
Robert Frost, celebrated American poet. Source just gives references.
Beloved for his poems about New England, nature, life, deceptively simple, deeply profound.
James Anthony Froude, English historian and novelist.
Interesting path. Ordained a deacon, but left due to skepticism. Wrote a massive history of England.
Based on impressive research, though his interpretations were often criticized, also wrote The English in Ireland.
Close friend of Thomas Carlyle. Wrote a very frank, controversial biography of him after Carlyle's death.
Yeah, raised questions about biographical honesty. Froude's own readership declined over time, despite his gifts.
Sir Vivian Fuchs, British geologist and explorer.
Led the Commonwealth Transantarctic Expedition in 1957-58.
The first overland crossing of Antarctica. Met Hillary's team at the South Pole. A huge feat of endurance and exploration. Wrote The Crossing of Antarctica.
Margaret Fuller, American journalist, critic, feminist.
Key figure in the Transcendentalist movement. Edited The Dial. Close friends with Emerson, Thoreau.
Wrote Woman in the 19th Century, a foundational text of American feminism. Advocated for women's equality and autonomy.
Became the first female foreign correspondent for a major U.S. paper, reporting from Europe.
Tragically died in a shipwreck returning to the U.S., along with her Italian partner and child. A brilliant career cut short.
Thomas Fuller, 17th century English writer and divine.
Best known for Worthies of England, a fascinating collection of biographies, anecdotes, witty observations.
Served as a royalist chaplain during the Civil War, but wasn't persecuted afterwards. Maybe his moderate nature helped. Charming writer.
Robert Fulton, American inventor and engineer, key figure in steam power.
Came from a modest background. Started as a painter, then turned to invention in England and France. Worked on submarines, early steamboats.
His big success was back in the U.S., launching the Clermont on the Hudson in 1807.
Proved the commercial viability of steam navigation, more efficient than earlier attempts. Ushered in the steamboat era.
Also built the first steam-powered warship, the Fulton. Significant impact on transport and naval tech.
And finally for the Fs, Wilhelm Furtwängler, German conductor.
Highly acclaimed, especially noted for his recordings with Kirsten Flagstad, as we mentioned earlier. A great artistic partnership.
Right. And that brings us to the Gs, starting with Galen.
Ancient Greek physician, immensely influential.
His medical theories dominated Western thought for over a millennium. based on animal dissection, but formed the basis of practice until the Renaissance. Profound, long-lasting impact.
Galerius, Roman emperor, late 3rd, early 4th century.
Rose through the army, won victories against Persia, became Caesar under Diocletian, then Augustus.
Primarily remembered for instigating the great persecution of Christians.
Yes, a brutal period. Though he issued an edict of toleration just before his death, a turning point leading towards Constantine's acceptance of Christianity. Galileo Galilei, absolute giant of the scientific revolution.
Italian physicist, astronomer, challenged everything.
Early work on pendulums, and famously, falling objects, showing they fall at the same rate, contradicting Aristotle, maybe at the Leaning Tower of Pisa?
Possibly. The key was his shift to empirical observation, experimentation. But his telescope work was truly revolutionary.
He improved the refracting telescope and just opened up the heavens.
Observed the moon's craters, the Milky Way stars, Jupiter's moons, sunspots, Saturn's rings, the phases of Venus.
Providing powerful evidence for Copernicus's heliocentric model, sun at the center, not Earth, fundamentally changed our view of the cosmos.
His observations, like the phases of Venus, were direct proof against the old model. His conflict with the church over it is a whole other story.
Indira Gandhi, daughter of Nehru, India's first PM, dominated Indian politics.
Educated in India and abroad, involved in the independence movement early on, president of the Congress Party, served as her father's assistant.
Became prime minister after Shastri died. Led India through war, developed the nuclear program, but also controversy.
The state of emergency in 75, suspending civil liberties, lost power, then returned in a landslide in 80.
A powerful, complex figure, assassinated by her own bodyguards in 1984.
Gerald Gardner, English lawyer, labor politician, major law reformer.
As Lord Chancellor in the 60s, he oversaw huge changes.
Abolition of the death penalty, decriminalizing homosexuality, establishing the Ombudsman, the Law Reform Commission, property rights for married women.
Really progressive reforms.
Yeah.
Modernized British law significantly. He was also targeted by an IRA bomb later.
Sir John Eliot Gardner, English conductor.
Highly respected. Studied with Nadia Boulanger. Founded key ensembles.
Monteverdi Choir, Orchestra Révolutionnaire Romantique, known for historically informed performances.
Using period instruments, period practices, brings a fresh perspective to Baroque and Romantic music. Extensive recordings, written a book on Bach, too.
James A. Garfield, 20th U.S. President. Brief mention in the source.
Noting his near tie in the popular vote in 1880, but losing the Electoral College. Assassinated very early in his term.
Giuseppe Garibaldi, Italian patriot, hero of the Risorgimento.
Sailor turned revolutionary. Joined Mazzini's Young Italy. Exiled to South America, gained military experience there.
Returned to Italy for the 1848 revolutions, fought the Austrians, key role in the Roman Republic.
His greatest triumph was leading the Red Shirts, his volunteers conquering Sicily and Naples in 1860.
Handed it all over to King Victor Emmanuel II for a united Italy, sought no reward for himself, charismatic, legendary figure.
David Garrick, 18th century English actor, theater manager.
Revolutionized acting towards a more natural style. Source mentions him arriving in London with Samuel Johnson, staging Johnson's play Irene.
Bill Gates, co-founder of Microsoft, changed the world of computing.
Dropped out of Harvard, developed MS-DOS, Windows, became a billionaire.
And his philanthropy now, through the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Huge focus on global health, education, poverty. Purchased Da Vinci manuscript, too.
Théophile Gautier, French writer, critic, associated with art for art's sake.
Believed in beauty independent of morality or politics. Vivid descriptions influenced later writers.
Piers Gaveston, Edward II's favorite, maybe lover.
Gaston Courtier, his closeness to the king infuriated the English barons.
Led to banishments, his eventual kidnapping and execution, sparked civil war, highlights the perils of royal favoritism.
John Gay, English poet, dramatist, friend of Pope.
Famous for The Beggar's Opera, huge hit. Satirized politics, Walpole, blended popular tunes with sharp commentary. Sequel Polly was banned. Wrote the libretto for Handel's Acis and Galatea. Buried in Westminster Abbey.
Joseph Louis Gay-Lussac, French chemist, physicist.
Important work on gases, his law of combining volumes, balloon ascents to study atmosphere, magnetism. Also inorganic chemistry discoveries, industrial process improvements like the Gay-Lussac Tower for sulfuric acid, linked fundamental science and industry.
Patrick Geddes, Scottish biologist, sociologist, town planner.
Pioneer of holistic, ecological urban planning. Influential ideas.
Lou Gehrig, baseball legend, the Iron Horse.
Played 2,130 consecutive games for the Yankees. Record stood for decades. tragically diagnosed with ALS, motor neuron disease, now often called Lou Gehrig's disease in the U.S. His farewell speech is iconic.
The Frank Gehry, Canadian-American architect.
Pritzker Prize winner, known for those distinctive sculptural buildings. Guggenheim Bilbao, Disney Concert Hall, deconstructivist style, flowing forms, unconventional materials, transform cityscapes.
Saint Genevieve, patron saint of Paris.
5th century religious figure, credited with calming Parisians during Attila the Hun's invasion threat. Attila bypassed the city, symbol of faith and leadership. Genghis Khan, founder of the Mongol Empire. Temujin,
United the Mongol tribes, led conquests, creating a vast empire across Asia.
known for military genius but also brutality. Some religious tolerance within the empire, but few permanent institutions left behind.
Still fascinates today. Films, books, genetic studies suggesting huge numbers of descendants, succeeded by Urgadai, grandson Kublai Khan. Timur's claim as successor is doubtful.
J. Paul Getty, American oil tycoon, immense wealth.
Controlled Getty Oil. Lived later years in England, funded the Getty Museum in L.A.
But apparently never visited it himself. Epitome of oil wealth, complex philanthropic legacy.
Al-Ghazali, Persian theologian, mystic, Al-Daghel in the West.
Influential Sunni scholar, taught in Baghdad. Wrote The Incoherence of the Philosophers.
Critiqued Aristotelian thinking in Islamic philosophy, arguing for limits of reason in metaphysics. Some say it impacted Muslim science, though Averro has rebutted him.
Embraced Sufi mysticism later. Pivotal figure in Islamic thought on faith and reason. Influential in the West, too.
Ghibellines, medieval Italian faction.
Supported the Holy Roman Emperors against the Pope. Rivals of the Guelphs. Named after Hohenstaufen and Warcry. Defined Italian politics for centuries.
Lorenzo Ghiberti, Italian Renaissance sculptor, goldsmith.
Famous for the bronze doors of the Florence Baptistry. Won the competition. Second pair so stunning, Michelangelo called them the gates of paradise. Masterful relief perspective. Masterpiece of Renaissance sculpture.
Edward Gibbon, English historian, briefly mentioned for his writing on Gordian II.
Author of The Monumental Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire. Engaging writer even on minor figures.
Josiah Willard Gibbs, American theoretical physicist, chemist, mathematician.
Foundational work in thermodynamics, statistical mechanics, laid groundwork for physical chemistry, genius not fully recognized in his lifetime.
Lyndhurst Falconer Giblin, Australian economist.
Anticipated the multiplier effect before Keynes fully developed it. First major Keynesian in Australia. Huge influence on policymakers like Chifley, Coombs.
André Gide, major French writer, Nobel Prize winner.
Complex background, Protestant upbringing, unhappy marriage due to homosexuality. Founded the influential journal La Nouvelle Revue Française.
Strong social conscience, protested conditions in the Congo, briefly drawn to communism, then disillusioned after visiting Russia.
His works explore freedom, desire, morality. Often controversial. Candid autobiographical writing. Considered second only to Proust in modern French literature.
Sir John Gielgud, English actor, theater legend.
Great-nephew of Ellen Terry. Defined Shakespearean acting for generations. Musical voice, nuanced interpretations. Also excelled in other playwrights. Films, won an Oscar for Arthur. Directing. Hugely influential career spanning decades.
Sir Humphrey Gilbert, Elizabethan navigator.
Believed in a northwest passage to China. Inspired exploration. Died at sea returning from an expedition. Embodied the era's spirit of adventure. Dame Sarah Catherine Gilbert. Contemporary English vaccinologist.
Led the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine development during the recent pandemic.
Incredibly rapid, effective work. Huge global impact. Vital role in public health.
Source notes: Gilbert and Sullivan, Giotto, the Jerome Bents, Giscard d'Estaing, Gladstone, Gluck, Goebbels, Godard, Gogol, Rube Goldberg, William Golding, Emma Goldman, Samuel Gompers, Maxim Gorky are all out for this dive.
Right. Lots of significant figures there for future exploration.
Kurt Gödel, Austrian-American logician.
Famous for his incompleteness theorems. Challenged Hilbert's idea that all math problems are solvable. Profound impact on math, logic, philosophy.
Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, German literary giant, mentioned for influencing Freud, snubbing Heine, friendship with Humboldt.
Peter Carl Goldmark, U.S. engineer at CBS.
Invented early color TV, the LP record, EVR, space probe scanners, visionary tech contributions.
Carlo Goldoni, Italian dramatist, reformed commedia dell'arte.
Wrote realistic, witty comedies. Servant of Two Masters adaptation is famous. Influenced by Molière, still popular.
Oliver Goldsmith, Irish writer, mentioned as following Farquhar's dramatic trends.
Nicholas Gomber, Netherlandish Renaissance composer.
Pupil of Josquin, perhaps. Worked for Charles V, master of complex polyphony.
Jola Gumbis, Hungarian politician, prime minister in the 30s.
Promoted fascist ideology, moved Hungary towards authoritarianism and the Axis.
So Ernst Hans Gombrich, British art historian.
Famous for the story of art, made art history accessible and engaging for millions. Hugely influential.
Juan Vicente Gomez, Venezuelan dictator, long, brutal rule.
Exploited oil wealth for personal gain while ruthlessly suppressing dissent. Masked tyranny with superficial order. Mikhail Gorbachev, Soviet leader. Briefly mentioned for his transformative role ending the Cold War.
Mikhail Gorchakov, Russian soldier, commanded in the Crimean War, including the defense of Sevastopol.
The Gordians. Roman emperors, first 533 during the chaotic 3rd century. Brief, unstable reigns. Hermann Goering, mentioned for a future dive on Nazi figures.
Arshil Gorky, American painter. Bridge between surrealism and abstract expressionism, not covered here.
John Gray Gorton, Australian PM, mentioned due to Fraser's clash with him.
Jay Gould, notorious American financier. Robert Barron, railroads, scandals, vast wealth.
Stephen Jay Gould, American paleobiologist, writer. Punctuated equilibrium theory, popularized science.
Charles Gounod, French composer, mentioned his teacher Halevi, known for Faust.
Francisco Goya, Spanish painter, court painter, but also depicted war, darkness. Deafness affected his later, intense work, precursor to expressionism.
The Gracchi brothers, Roman reformers, Tiberius and Gaius.
Attempted land reform. Faced elite opposition, both assassinated. Highlighted Republic's growing social tensions.
Duke of Grafton, British PM, target of the letters of Junius.
Billy Graham, American evangelist, global crusades, spiritual advisor to presidents, influential religious figure.
Martha Graham, pioneer of modern dance, developed contraction and release technique, revolutionary choreographer, huge influence.
Ulysses S. Grant, mentioned for Vicksburg campaign link to Farragut's naval control.
Oh, Granville, British statesman, not covered.
Kate Greenaway, English illustrator. Charming, idealized children's book illustrations, distinctive style.
Graham Greene, English novelist. Brighton Rock, The Power and the Glory. Explored faith, morality, often in thriller formats. Major 20th century writer.
Jules Grévy, French president. Forced to resign over son-in-law scandal. Has a zebra named after him.
Earl Grey, British PM, oversaw Reform Act 1832, abolition of slavery. Linked somehow to the T.
Edvard Grieg, Norwegian composer. Not covered.
D.W. Griffith, pioneering film director. Not covered.
The Grimm brothers, German collectors of fairy tales. Not covered.
Walter Gropius, Bauhaus founder, modern architect. Not covered.
Alexander Grothendieck, German-French mathematician. Algebraic geometry pioneer. Turned to activism later.
Hugo Grotius, Dutch jurist. Founder of modern international law on the law of war and peace.
And F.S. Grundtvig, Danish bishop, poet, educator. Inspired folk high schools. Hymn writer.
Matthias Grunewald, German Renaissance painter. Eisenheim altarpiece is his masterpiece. Intense, emotional, mystical style.
Guadalcanal and Guernica, not covered.
Che Guevara, revolutionary, not covered.
Francesco Guicciardini, Italian Renaissance historian, not covered.
Guillaume II, German emperor, not covered.
Sir Benjamin Lee Guinness,
Brewer.
mentioned re grandson's title.
Sacha Guitry, French actor, playwright, director, dominant figure in theater and film, faced collaboration charges.
Johannes Gutenberg, inventor printing press, not covered here.
And Nell Gwyn, restoration actress, mistress of Charles II.
Orange seller turned popular actress and royal favorite. Witty, charming. Legend connects her to Chelsea Hospital founding.
Wow, that was quite a journey through just F&G, an incredible range of people, places, ideas.
Absolutely, from emperors and artists to scientists and revolutionaries. And you see these threads, these unexpected links sometimes.
Yeah, maybe seeing someone you thought you knew in a slightly different light, or how seemingly separate lives connect across time or discipline.
And hopefully, for you listening, this gives you a really solid handle on these figures and the times they lived in. Kind of a shortcut to being clued in on a lot of history.
It really makes you pause, though. The sheer volume of human achievement, impact, drama.
Yeah.
Just within these two letters.
Exactly. What other fascinating stories are just waiting to be uncovered in the rest of the alphabet? This deep dive is really just scratching the surface of a much, much bigger exploration.